Hello, my name is Mr. McQuire and a warm welcome to this presentation today when we will be looking at the subject of fertilization and gestation. This is lesson number 6 in the topic of homeostasis and reproduction. In our learning journey so far, we have covered a wide range of topics. The general subject heading homeostasis and reproduction, homeostasis meaning keeping things the same. So we have looked at the central nervous system, then we've looked at the eye as one of the receptors for the central nervous system, one of the effectors for the central nervous system is a hormone. Then we have looked at hormones in the nature of reproductive organs, and we have then controlled the menstrual cycle and the development of the body ready for reproduction through those hormones again, and looked at the parts of the reproductive system. And then finally today, at the end of this particular topic, we are now looking at fertilization, where the gametes fuse, and gestation, the length of time it takes for the offspring to be born. So before we start, let's try and find somewhere that's quiet to work and free from distractions, and make sure we have a pen and paper ready to work. So let's start off by doing a little bit of mental exercise to warm ourselves up. Can you recall the names of the male and female sex gametes from the reproduction lesson that we had? And can you say where those gametes are produced? You've got 1 minute to do some thinking, find somewhere quiet to work and get some paper ready. Okay, so let's have a look at those for a second. First of all, the names of the gametes. So that's a test already. You should know that they are sex cells, are the egg and the sperm. And the eggs are produced by the ovaries in female and by the testes in the male. So let's look at our learning outcomes for today. First of all, for our challenge, to compare different gestation periods. Gestation being the length of time it takes for the baby to develop before birth, before or after fertilization. So let's start off our journey today by looking backwards for a second and just doing a bit of revision. On the photograph in front of you, it's asking a question about why it is that we can look very similar to our parents. And if we had time to look at the photograph for a long period of time, we could talk about eye colour, and we could talk about hair type, colour of hair, curly or not curly, for example. We could talk about the shape of a face, etc. And of course, all of these factors are passed on from our parents. And as we have learnt about the word gametes, we should already know that our gametes contain the genetic code that we pass. So here is our keyword variation. So humans, like other organisms, inherit characteristics from their parents. The gametes are slightly different each time, offspring are produced, and this results in this variation. Now, this variation is very, very important, because what it means is that that variation can be selected for, and it's that variation that results in evolution, because some of the variants are more successful than others. So we're going to start now building up our notes. I'd like you to put the title that's on the page in front of you. What happens during fertilization? I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Top and center of your page, and underline it. So this is part of our journey towards explaining the process of fertilization. We have some very important keywords, some of which look back over previous lessons that we've had, the parts of the reproductive systems of the male and the female, and we still need that understanding today. But it is extended today with words like uterus, fertilization, fusion, and gestation. So hopefully you've got that title. If you need to pause, then please do that. We're going to look at that photograph in a bit more detail that's on the slide in front of you as we go as well. So we're now going to start looking at stage 1. And stage 1 involves the following keywords that we need to use to ensure that we are explaining ourselves clearly. First word is gametes, and the gametes are shown on the photograph that is here. We have the male sperm and the female egg, which is colossal in size compared to it. And we have already talked about gametes, the sperm and the egg. The next word here is fuse, and the photograph that you have here shows the male sperm, and what happens is that the male genes, the DNA from the male fuses with the female DNA in the egg, and that process that is occurring here is called fertilization. Now, this is all stage 1, and I'm going to go through this one more time with you, but we're going to change slides to do that. I'm going to give you a minute and a half to enable you to write down stage 1. So there's what I've just said in a single sentence. Fertilization is the joining or fusion of a male gamete. Notice it doesn't use the word sperm in there, so we would need to add that and the female gamete, the egg. So let's try recording that. Let's have some detail first though. There's the sperm. Let's be clear about the egg. Okay, so you have now got a minute and a half in which to explain the process of fertilization. You need to be able to see those keywords, so there they are for you, and I've put the photograph that's there just to help with that as well. So let's have a look at what you have written then. Fertilization is the joining or fusion of a male gamete, and then you need to include the word sperm there, and a female gamete, and then you need to include the word egg there. So that's stage 1 completed. Let's now move on. Could you put a subheading of stage 2? So we've looked at stage 1. Now let's look at some of the keywords for stage 2. And those keywords include uterus, zygote, embryo and fetus. Now the details are quite a lot bigger this time, so what I'm going to do this time is to run through these words with you and then allow you to put them down into your notes. So let's have a look at that. So first of all, once a fertilized egg settles in the wall of the uterus, it begins to grow and develop into a baby. At first it is just a cell known as a zygote, so there's the first key word, and this cell divides. A tiny ball of cells is created, and that is known as an embryo. So a zygote is a single fertilized cell, whereas an embryo is a ball of cells. And then finally, once you can make out the head and the arms and legs, etc., and you recognize what kind of animal it is, then at that point it is called a fetus. So what I would like you to do is to spend a minute and a half now just getting that information down into your notes, and when you have finished doing that, I'd like to put stage 3 and get ready by writing down a list that is in that question in the bottom right hand corner of things that a fetus needs from mum to give back to mum, and things that shouldn't be given to a fetus by mum. So first of all, let's get some notes down that are in front of you for stage 2 there. So we've had stage 1, which dealt with the fertilization of the egg and referred to gametes. Then we've had stage 2, which looks at the change from a zygote, single egg, to an embryo, a ball of cells, and finally to a recognizable fetus. And now we are on stage 3, where we are looking at these 3 words: placenta and umbilical cord. Please notice the spelling of cord. It's different from the music chord, which has an H in it, so we're going to be careful with that. Now this also brings this question that I've asked you here about things that a fetus needs and does not need from mum, and we're going to address that as well. So you need a subheading of stage 3 now, and we're going to look at that together next. So here is stage 3. You'll need this again as part of your notes. As the fetus grows in the mother's uterus, and here's the list that maybe you have made. It needs to be fed, so it will need food that the mother provides. It has a supply of oxygen that is required again. It needs to be protected from harmful infections, so that's something that mother doesn't need to give it, and it needs to get rid of waste products. Now, in order to do this, a round disc-like organ is developed called the placenta that grows on the surface of the uterus. And of course, this is connected to the baby via the umbilical cord. So here is a photograph, and it shows the placenta on the wall of the uterus, and then we have this wiggly pipe that connects to your navel or belly button, and that was connected to your umbilical cord. So I'd like you please to get those notes down in front of you there, and you have got a minute and a half to do that. Okay, pause the presentation if you need more time on that. So here's our final sentence that I'd like you to add as well. This is connected to the growing baby by the umbilical cord. Okay, let's move on from there. If you need to pause the presentation, do that at this moment now. So here's a new title, and this is a more general knowledge that I would like you to hold in your head. We could spend a lot of time writing general notes down, and I don't particularly want to do that because I suspect that you already know that there are things that mothers should be doing and shouldn't be doing when they are pregnant. So how can maternal lifestyle affect the fetus through the placenta? And that is our title. And we are literally going to write very, very brief reminders of things that should and shouldn't be happening. And this is going to go through several slides now. I'm going to be quite quick with this because I'd like you to be able to answer general knowledge questions that would involve people being healthier while they are pregnant, for example. So how can maternal lifestyle affect the fetus through the placenta? So here's a hint, and you may already have put this down and said that mother shouldn't be smoking. So let's be clear about the details for things like smoking, for example. So in smoking, cigarettes restrict the essential supply of oxygen to the baby. So therefore the heart has to beat harder every time the mother smokes. And the reason for that is because in cigarette smoke we have the substance that's called carbon monoxide. This is the second paragraph here. It also has other poisons that pass into your lungs. And the effect of this, it means that our babies get less oxygen. Because they get less oxygen, they don't grow as well as they should, so they're smaller. And that can lead to premature birth, so they don't reach full term. And we'll be talking about this word gestation that's in the challenge above shortly. And also nicotine as a stimulant makes the baby's heart beat faster. So smoking is a key lifestyle choice that will have a direct impact negatively on the development of a baby, and the reasons why are in front of you there. Let's have a look at another one. Another thing that a mother should not be passing through to its baby is summarised by the emotive picture there of a gin bottle with a baby's dummy stuck in the top. Alcohol in itself can lead to something called fetal alcohol syndrome, which has a range of issues which mainly stem from a problem with brain development due to the effect of alcohol passing through the placenta into the baby's bloodstream. And that can result in attention deficit and memory deficits. And because of that, we then have some associated other issues that are listed there. So having looked now at the processes of fertilization and looked at some things that shouldn't be done during the development of the fetus into an embryo, through smoking and through alcohol, we're now looking at something called gestation, which is the length of time that it takes for the fetus to develop before it is born. So what I would like you to do is to put the title of gestation. Let's look at the definition, which is in the blue box there. It is the process of developing in the uterus between fertilization and birth. So once you have put down the title, I'd like you to write down the definition that is there. When you finish writing that down, if you've still got time, I'd like you to think for a moment about how long human gestation is, and if you understand anything about animal gestation, do all animals have the same gestation period? And if they don't, why not? So it's an important question. So you've got a minute and a half to get those notes down first and think about those questions. So I would hope that you know that the human gestation is 9 months long. So that's the period between fertilization of the egg and the sperm and the birth of the baby. So do all animals have the same gestation period? No, they don't. And if not, why not? Well, different animals have different complexities in terms of their genetic building, and they also have different lifestyles. and by that I mean their life cycles are different, so therefore they're born in different states of preparation. So some animals are capable of reproducing very quickly, and some animals they have to develop an awful lot more before they are born to allow their reproduction. That embryo eventually becomes recognizable then and starts to develop buds, a head, legs, and it becomes a fetus, and we see that development continuing through the next few weeks. And here we have a fetus at 15 weeks old being very much recognizable, but still within an amazing amount of development to do, because that is a very enlarged photograph and it's much larger than the real thing would be. So by 16 weeks we've got movement, and we are again looking at the continued development of the brain and internal organs. The heart has been beating for a very long period of time and can be picked up by people like the midwife, for example, using special microphones held over the top of the uterus. By 20 weeks, you can see we've got hair on this photograph as well, and we're talking about viable babies at this point, that if they're born prematurely with very clever nursing and care, they can continue to be looked after. And 24 weeks, you can see on the right hand picture that we have downy hair completely covering the fetus, and we have this white gooey stuff on the eyebrows there, and babies can be born covered in that. This stuff's called vernix, and the baby at this point now has been sitting in liquid inside that sac for a considerable length of time, and indeed it's been adding to that liquid through its own ability to urinate, and that's rather a grim thought, but our kidneys have been working for a considerable period of time and our bladder has been emptying. So we're now going to use some data that is about gestation, and I need you to show me your graph drawing skills independently. But I also want you to show me your interrogation skills in terms of the data and how we can draw the graph and then use it to answer questions. So, well, first thing I'd like you to do is to order the data from the least to the greatest. So looking at that data, rather interesting, the gestation period for a hamster is only 16 days compared to an elephant, which is 660 days, and that's a massive difference. You can see a human in there with 270 days. I'd like you then to draw a graph, and you need to decide what variable goes on which axis. So you've obviously got two lots of data there. You've got the name of the animal, and you also have the number of days, and you need to decide where that goes. You need to have a scale that will allow you to go up to the largest number once you've put them in order, and then you need to draw a bar chart. Now, I cannot predict how long you will need to draw that bar graph, so what I would like you to do is to draw the axis and put down as much detail as you need to construct that bar graph properly, and I'd like you to pause the presentation to enable you to do that so you can still see this data that's in front of you. So let's just make sure before we ask you some questions that you have put everything that you need to have on your graph. First of all, have you ordered the gestation periods from least to the greatest so we can see a pattern in your graph? Have you drawn a scale that will allow all results to be displayed? Have you labelled your axis properly? And I'll show you this graph in a moment. And have you drawn a bar chart for all of the gestation periods? But have you not just done that? Have you done it accurately? So now let's have a look at the some questions to interrogate that graph. So first of all, let's see if you can answer these before I give you some answers. What animal has the longest gestation? Okay, just a quick look. That's going to be your tallest bar, which of course is an elephant at 660 days. Which animal has the shortest gestation? Well, goodness me, it's a hamster, which is only 16 days, which is quite remarkable. So does a dog or a cat have a longer gestation period, and by how much? Well, I was quite surprised with this information, and you may be. Well, a dog was 61 days and a cat was 63 days. So a cat has the longer gestation period by two more days. So what is the difference in gestation of a human and an elephant? Well, having looked at those numbers for a moment, we can see that an elephant has a gestation period which is 2.5 times longer than a human. So question 5, the pattern then, as the size of an animal increases, the gestation also increases. So let's look at the graph you should have drawn. First of all, we've got the x-axis which has animals on it, and we've put those in order of increasing gestation periods. Pulled humans to one side for comparison, I think. On the left hand side we've then got a nice even scale, you'll notice 100s as you go up the side, and we have then drawn the graphs in relation to those scales so they're nice and accurate, and you can see very, very clearly all of the parts that we asked for. We've got labels on the axis 0.1, we've got a correct scale 0.2, and the bars are plotted within half a small square. Now you may have had to draw this using a ruler and pencil, so it may not be quite accurate enough, but well done for your attempts. So welcome to our plenary. This is quite straightforward, and I don't think it will take us long to do that. So what I would like you to do is to spend the next minute and a half, I think, just filling in the gaps that we have there. If you wrote the sentences out properly, that would take a minute and a half, and I'd like you to just make sure that those are completed tidily at the end of a topic where we have produced lots of notes today, so just be careful to finish this properly. Okay, if you've not completed the questions, then just pause the presentation now. Now, we should be excited if we can complete these questions properly, because they are showing our learning outcomes very clearly. The first question then, the female gamete is called the egg. The second question, the male gamete is called the sperm. The female gamete is produced in the ovary, which again is in the box. And from today's lesson, male and female gametes join together in a process that is called fertilization. So let's just run through those. And there are our answers for you. Just make sure you've written those in properly. So let's look at our learning outcomes in conclusion. First of all, for our challenge, we have compared different gestation periods, and we've drawn a graph of those and talked about the relationship between gestation and animal size. And then for the Aspire, we have explained the stages in the process of fertilization. My name is Mr. McGuire, and goodbye.